And it kind of plays to another stereotype. I remember way back when one of the material designers was telling me that when they were trying to pitch material design to Asia, they they found that the Japanese version of of material was very simplistic, minimalist, as the stereotype would be. But in China, they preferred a more chaotic UI. I'm wondering now that when they were doing the research, if the participants were just basically giving this international persona to this foreign person who's come to Japan, say, no, no, this is what Japanese design is, but without actually being honest, saying, no, no, it's much more chaotic. So it's like, you know, that thing of if you ask people directly, they won't necessarily tell you the truth. They'll tell you what they think you want to know.
Yeah.
So I mean, and then seeing these like multiple examples of the difference between Japanese design and like day to day stuff, I thought, okay, so it's not as simple as, you know, we think simplistic design, like but with beautiful complexity, like origami or the manga or like the architecture, like all these kind of stereotypes. It feels like we've either been sold as like a branding exercise from Japan, which is not necessarily accurate representation of day to day life, which I thought was really fascinating. I mean, you look at the difference between the coffee machines. I mean, what is going on? Like, you have to go to the YouTube channel to see this, but it's basically like a normal coffee machine with 1,000 labels printed everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. One is just like the visual nature of Japanese text. It just I don't think it fits these models. It could be like just a lot of additional detail, or they're trying to convert a Western machine to make it fit with you know um, Japanese people coming in and out of the coffee shop. The one thing that I found interesting is that this is like at a larger level. The first time I went to Japan, like specifically Tokyo, I found it to be like this like total contrast in like a good way, where you walk through like this amazing calm garden temple, like that's so serene, and it's you can hear it's very organized, it's well manicured. And then a couple blocks down, you're like in the thick of a city that has signs everywhere, neon lights, people, energy. There's just like, so it reminds me of like looking at this coffee machine. It reminds me of like walking through like Shibuya. I think that's how you say it. Like one of the more like, I guess, business touristy districts. And this is like exactly what it was, just like a bunch of stuff like thrown at you all at once. So I would love to get Mika on to kind of like help us sort through this. My other reaction is I think that it's the age old thing with design where it's like too much. If you give a user or a reader too much information, like nothing is actually processed. So I'm curious if if somebody walked into the store and they saw, all of this text on this machine, do they still even get the coffee machine? Because coffee is inherently fairly simple. So a few things there. One is, have you been to Japan, and do you feel like that metaphor that I mentioned is accurate? And two is like, don't you think that this is almost bad design, or do you think it's just part of the culture and it's completely accepted?
Yeah, I mean, well, to the second point, it's just it'll be difficult to like, without actually having someone explain some of the historical context to say like their design. It'll be hard to really determine. One thing which I remember there was a TED talk where it was a guy from China and he was talking about the differences between language. He was trying to basically show that different languages will have different effects on people's view to money and economics. Like languages which have a lot of future tense type grammar are less likely to do things in the immediate term, and therefore they won't be as successful. Where languages which are all present tense have a tendency to do things in the moment and get things done. But he was talking when he started the talk. He was speaking about how if you say uncle in Chinese, you would know if the uncle was related to your mother, to your father, it was related through marriage, and all these other details. Like in English, it's just auntie and uncle, but in Chinese and also in Turkish, so in many other languages, you have all these different words for something that seems like the same thing. So I'm wondering if in this coffee machine, well, it might be a black coffee. It's not just a black coffee like in Japan. It would be a black coffee with some other kind of beans or whatever. So they need to actually list out what you're actually getting with all these different variations. Almost like, in German, it's like compound languages, so you have really long words. But yeah, no, I mean, okay, you found an article, The Overwhelming World of Japanese Web Design. So yeah, I mean, this is like where you really need someone who's an expert in that field. I think we have a lot of standards in the world of web design which are based on a very Western cultural approach. I remember being in Turkey and speaking with a web design news agency, and they had lots of carousels. And at that point, the world of web carousels was like, this is terrible UX. And when I explained to the news site, like, this is really, really bad UX, they said to me, oh no, we removed them, but then our users complained because this is how they pass the information really quickly. I think I've given this example before. And that kind of took me back thinking, hang on, are we superimposing Western fields to like the standards of design? And what does that mean for design languages or design systems, that we're saying this is like the de facto thing that everyone should be applying? But should they? And so should design systems be customized completely depending on the culture that they're in, or should these cultures really adopt better user experiences? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, does that make our design systems imperialistic in nature? Do you know what I mean? It brings up all these other things. And again, it's like the Chinese example where they really like lots of UI and lots of buttons because it feels like they're getting their money's worth, as opposed to, do they actually accomplish what they want?
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Design Huddle. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not express the views or opinions of our employer.